on during her encounter. Her husband passed away and wrote about it in his diary. They didn't talk about it at the time that it really happened, and he saw a lot more than she did. And my final guest tonight will be Alec. He had one of these creatures get up and run past him. He thought he was sneaking in on a bullfrog, but this creature stood up and ran past him. It's a very fascinating encounter. I appreciate you guys being here tonight. Let's jump right into it. Tom, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here tonight, man.
Thanks for having me.
And if you would, kind of start from the beginning. When did you start to notice things going on around this property? And just kind of walk the audience into what you've experienced.
Well, I've been living at this house for about 5 to 6 years, and I want to say about a year and a half ago, I was bringing out. I have a routine every night. I bring out my garbage. I put it under my porch, and I kept feeling like every time I was going out there, like I was getting stared at, or like something was watching me every time I was going out to the woods. So one particular night, I decided just to bring a flashlight with me, and I figured I'd look behind just to see if anything was, anything out there. And when I did, I put the trash in the barrel. I turned around and I looked, and I seen these huge eyes staring right at me from the backwoods. And the way the property is, it kind of goes down an incline, and there's a creek. It's kind of like a little valley, and it was down in there, and it had solid red eyes, and they were just massive.
When you turned with the flashlight and you hit it with the light, how tall up would you say the eyes were?
I would have to say about 7 to 8 feet. But the only reason why I could gauge that was because I had a chair sitting out by the creek. It was like a white Rubbermaid chair, and I could see the chair, but I couldn't see anything else but the eyes. It was just pure black, and it was about 8 feet tall.
The outline of what you were looking at was pure black?
Yeah, it was pure black.
And the eyes, it kind of illuminated red. What was it, a figure of like a man, or what would you say the figure was?
I mean, the figure, it looked like a man. The eyes were huge. I mean, the minute I locked eyes with it, my heart started pounding, because this thing was just grilling me. And we're talking, I'm about maybe 30 feet, 35 feet from it.
Oh, wow. So you're really close. Really close.
Real close. That was my first encounter with it.
And I know you have some pictures, and I've seen some of the pictures, and there's definitely something in the foliage. I mean, it's an outline of what looks like a person that's all black. I mean, just everything's all black when I looked at them. And I was shocked when I saw them. I mean, some of the pictures I was really shocked by. But as you hit the light on this thing, it has an outline of a man. It has red eyes. What did you think you were looking at that point?
I really wasn't quite sure, because in my mind, I never, I believe that, these creatures are out there, but I never, in my mind, thought, well, this, in a local rural neighborhood in my area or New Hampshire, that I was going to, be seeing one of these. But I wasn't really quite sure what it was.
Yeah, it's interesting. They're definitely out there in New Hampshire. I've talked to actually very few witnesses, but I have talked to a couple out there, and I think people are just more tight-lipped on what's going on out that way. Well, as you walked around the property, as you went around the property, what other things happened at that house?
As I walk around the property, there's a couple interesting things. Some trees are snapped down, like a set of three. They're thick poison sumac, and they were all snapped in half, kind of facing outward, which I found kind of odd. Like, kind of don't know really what would do that, but it just struck me as odd. And there's in this one particular area, a lot of the trees are just pulled over, kind of like bowed. And there's a bunch of them all in one spot. And in that spot is almost like a tree marker where branches are shoved through the tree that don't belong in the area. And it has tiny branches stacked around the bottom. It's just kind of the oddest thing, because it looks out of the ordinary.
Have you noticed anything else in that area? That's definitely odd when you see trees broken that way and sticks that you don't find in other areas. What else are you finding out there that's kind of strange?
Well, I mean, I've seen a beaver. We have a beaver out in the back here, and there was a cut piece of nice thick branch. You know, it had to have been about 9 feet piece of wood, and it was shoved into the embankment of the creek with the beaver cut end sticking up. And I'm thinking to myself, well, you know, how did that end up like that? You know, just and beside where the stick was shoved in on the embankment, there was a footprint right by it, and it looked huge. I didn't venture over to that part of the woods to investigate it any further, because kind of at that point I had realized I had a situation going on.
Yeah, and when you and I talked the first time, I know they had slapped your home. Do you want to kind of talk about that? Talk about the first time it happened and what you experienced?
Sure. When I first realized that they were out on my property, I had went out to the woods and had a little fun with a paintball gun. Didn't realize the scope of really what I was doing. By doing that, I didn't think nothing of it. I thought, okay, you know what? I went out there, I had a little fun. And that night, I'm sitting in my living room, and this thing punched the side of the house so hard. I mean, I couldn't move. I was like frozen in my chair. It scared the life out of me, and I did not get up or go outside to go check this out. It was pretty scary, and it also continued to happen for about 2 weeks after that.
It would come up and hit the house?
Yes, they come up and hit the house. And it's just the weirdest thing, because if I was in the bedroom by myself, the bedroom would get hit. It was kind of like focused towards me. So I kind of put two and two together, you know, my actions by going out there. So I kind of had that feeling like I was being targeted.
I bet. So no matter what room in the house you were in, it would actually come up and
yes, it would
hit that side of the wall. That's strange. And did it stop after 2 weeks, or did it continue? Is it sporadic?
It's continued. The tapping on the house, I hear it all the time. It kind of has calmed down a little bit. The less I stay away from the woods, the more they kind of back off.
Yeah, and I thought that was interesting that you said that. I know when you and I talked the first time, you'd mentioned every time you go back into those woods, it seems like the ramping up of it slapping on your home definitely picks up.
Yes, it does.
Does the slapping at the home, does it only happen at night?
Yes, it does, yeah.
And is there an average time?
Generally from 11 o'clock on. 11 o'clock to 2 a.m., right in that general area.
Have you ever stepped outside when it was slapping your home?
No, I haven't. I kind of get the feeling that it was kind of calling me out, and I honestly was just too scared to go out the door.
One of the questions I want to ask you, Tom, is have you talked to some of your neighbors around you and asked them, hey, have you guys ever experienced anything odd out here?
Actually, no, I have not. No. I kind of kept it to myself for the most part. I really haven't talked with any neighbors about it. Kind of one of those subjects you really, you just want to be, careful with what, you're talking with your neighbors about,
Yeah, no, I definitely understand. It's interesting, too, as you describe the area. It sounds like there's plenty of water, there's plenty of cover. It sounds like a perfect environment, plenty of food, there's farms nearby. Have you noticed anything else strange going on around the property?
Yeah, we have, I have the metal lawn furniture out in the yard. Sometimes the chairs will be moved or knocked over. Sometimes when it gets dusk out, they'll throw pebbles at the furniture. I can hear it hitting the metal on the chairs, and I find the pebbles on the ground.
Yeah, and that's interesting. It's like you and I were talking the other day. There's a guy that he was telling me he has these things on his property, and he was explaining to me all the different things going on. He's like, I think the one I have on my property is retarded. And I said, well, why do you say that? And He said, well, I'll have at night, especially in the summertime, I'll open my windows and I can hear it throwing pebbles at the lawn furniture. And he goes, I don't really understand why it's throwing them at the lawn furniture. It's the weirdest thing. He goes, as soon as the dark comes, these pebbles start flying in from the wood line, and they're just throwing them at the lawn furniture. They're not even at the house, or it's like it's directed at the lawn furniture.
Yeah. It's the oddest thing. It really is. It's almost like they're letting me know that they're here.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like it. Definitely sounds like it.
That's my take on it.
Well, what are you hoping to accomplish, or are you trying to accomplish anything with them on the property? I mean, and by that, what I mean is, do you want them to leave? Are you wanting to see them again? What are you kind of, where are you at on this property?
I really want to have nothing to do with them. I wish they were off my property, to be honest with you. From what I've experienced, they're pretty hostile for the most part.
What else have they done that would you say is hostile?
Again, in the beginning, when I had gone out in the woods and had fun with the paintball gun, I was feeding some feral cats and leaving food by the wood line. And after I had did that, I went out one night to put out food, and I could hear this thing walking up on me. I mean, it was real close. Couldn't see anything, but I heard it, and it sounded massive. So I knew I was kind of in a situation. So I just kind of put my hands up I surrender. And I just kind of backed off and walked back towards the house, backwards. I mean, for me, it's kind of, coming up on me like that, even in my own backyard. A little scary.
Yeah, no, that's really scary. Are you still feeding the feral cats?
Well, what I did is I still am, but I stopped putting it near the woods, and now I put it on the opposite side of the house to kind of keep it away from the wood line.
Yeah, that's pretty smart. I was going to say you might be unintentionally feeding these things instead of the feral cats.
I think I was. And another odd thing that kind of happened, when I was doing that feeding, before any of this kind of happened, something had left a turkey feather on my chair on my porch. It was just kind of like the oddest thing. I was just outside like 5 minutes prior to that, and I had come back out, and there's this turkey feather sitting there. I was like, that's strange. How'd that get there?
Yeah, do you guys have turkeys nearby in the woods?
We do, yeah. They travel through a lot, yes.
I gotcha. So you stepped away for a moment, you came back, there was a turkey feather on your chair?
Yeah, it was kind of odd.
Yeah, that is odd. It's hard to say with these things. I think you might have been unintentionally feeding them. At least that was my impression after you and I hung up the other night, Tom. I was thinking, I bet he was feeding those things and he doesn't even realize it. Was that food going pretty quick?
It was, yeah. It'd be gone pretty fast. And it wouldn't matter what I put out there either. I mean, sometimes it would, be dry cat food or, dinner scraps, or it would disappear pretty quickly.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you haven't had anything else major happen around the property. Have you actually taken a step into that area that you try and avoid because you feel like you're being watched all the time?
I have not. No, I haven't gone out there since the last house slap. I just don't have the courage to go out into that part of the woods at all. It's my property. That's the kicker. I'm afraid to go out in my own woods. I feel like if I do walk out there, it's gonna amp everything right back up.
Yeah, the other thing you can try and do is put game cams up and see if they'll back away from that area of the property if you want them to leave. I don't know if it's the infrared light or the sound or what it is about the game cams, but they tend to avoid them. They tend to avoid them like the plague. And so a lot of times people have set up game cams, and the Sasquatch seem to kind of leave the area. They just really want nothing to do with it. Why, I don't know. But for whatever reason, a lot of witnesses I've talked to in the past that had these things around their property and really didn't want them on the property, wanted them to go, would set up game cams everywhere. Even the guys from the Siege of Hanabia, they said go buy the cheapest game cams you can get from the store. Make sure they have a heavy infrared light and set them up around your house. They'll never slap your house again. They'll never touch your house again.
Yeah, I'll definitely try that. Definitely.
Well, has there been anything else strange that's happened around the property?
Not as recent, no. I mean, as far as the only other odd thing that I did notice is on the back of the house, I do have a motion sensor light. And this has been going on for a while. I've been finding broken branches in the backyard, twigs, all over the place. And the light will constantly go off all night long. And, for no reason. I look out the window, nothing's there, but the light's going off. It's just another one of those strange things that keeps happening.
That's really strange. Yeah, you have to keep us updated, Tom, on everything going on around that property. I'm kind of curious I get what you're saying. I kind of want them gone too, especially if I was afraid to go on certain portions of my own property.
Yeah.
I'd probably want them gone. But keep us updated and be safe while you're out there.
Definitely will.
Well, I appreciate you coming on, sir.
And I thank you. And I definitely appreciate your show.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for coming on. Let's jump to Kathy. Kathy, who's about to head to Mexico. I'm so jealous. Kathy, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Hi. How are you today?
I'm doing good. I was definitely interested in your email. If you would, I guess for the audience, just kind of start from the beginning. Tell us what you were out doing and what you experienced, and then kind of how you found out later what actually happened.
Okay. I lived in a very rural part of northern Michigan, about 25 miles south of the Mackinac Bridge. The only reason we lived there was because of a golf course. The street I lived on was about 2 miles long, no street lights, and there were 3 houses that were probably thousands of feet apart, densely wooded. We had deer everywhere, and at night it was pitch black. So one night there was a lunar eclipse going on, so we walked down our street quite a ways, maybe a quarter of a mile, to where the tower poles opened up where you could really get just a perfect shot of the moon. And we were sitting there in lawn chairs. I think I was sitting in a lawn chair. My husband was standing behind me. And all of a sudden, I smelled something like the smelliest skunk, rankest smell I have ever smelled in my life. I have a flashlight. I'm flashing in front of me. I don't see anything. This goes on for about 3 or 4 minutes. And all of a sudden, my husband says, "We have to go home now." And my husband was very kind to me. He's since passed away, but I could tell in his voice that there was something going on that I was not totally sure what was going on, but he said, "We got to go."
And was it about the same time as you smelled that smell?
Yes. It was like within 7 or 8 minutes of smelling that. And the smell never left. I mean, it was there the whole time. And I've never smelled anything so rank in my life since. So we walked back to the house, and I never asked him, I never questioned him why he didn't want to sit there and see the rest of the eclipse. And then he passed away. I was going through some of his papers, and my husband never really wrote things down very much. And he wrote down that he had seen something standing behind us about 20, 25 feet from where I was sitting. He didn't know what it was. He knew it wasn't a bear. He thought it was about 8 feet tall. And he shined on it with his flashlight and got eye shine back. And it was very chilling to me because I'm from Southern California. I don't know anything about the woods. I don't know about deer or bear or anything like that. I know that the area that we lived in was just surrounded by deer. And so that always, I never really gave it, I just thought it was a skunk myself. He never really said anything. But the next week, he said because I used to walk up the street all the time, take your 22 with you. And I thought that was really odd, but I put it in my pocket and I would walk around with my little pistol. And I did that for 15 years. I never could go outside at night by myself without almost having a panic attack, because we had a long driveway, nobody around, and it was just always really, it was like I could never get comfortable going outside. They had fireflies. I always wanted to go out and look at the fireflies, but I could never go out there by myself. I always had to drag him with me.
Just kind of a dread of like being watched, or?
Yeah. I'm not even sure if it was being watched, but it was always just so creepy to me, and I am not afraid of the dark. So that was something that I just got to the point where I didn't even go outside at night. During the day, I was fine, no problem whatsoever. But we had a house that faced onto the golf course and had a lot of windows, and we had deer in the yard all the time. And every once in a while, they'd just be standing there, and the next thing you know, they were just like running like something was chasing them, and you could never see anything, you could never hear anything. It was always maybe near twilight. It stays light in the summer. They're really, really late. I mean, it might not get dark till 10 o'clock. And then as I'm reading this little paper that he had written, he had also said that he worked as a lineman. That was his profession, and he became a foreman. But he worked in Northern California near Bridgeport, and said that he had seen something up there. He didn't say what it was. He just said, I saw something up there too. And they offered him a job in the Bridgeport area, and he said no. We lived in Southern California before we retired and moved to Michigan, and he was up in the San Gabriel foothills a lot. Sometimes they would have to hike into power lines to fix the poles if they were leaning or whatever. And he said that he had seen something up there also. And again, he didn't say what, but he and his crew left pretty fast, and they were not allowed to carry any kind of firearms or anything with them because of the OSHA codes and all that stuff. So they were basically there with, just whatever tools they had with them. So, and
yeah, that's interesting. I mean, it must be like a diary or something that he wrote that you found.
It was, and it was just sort of like different highlights of his life. I was just amazed when I found this. It was in a briefcase that I didn't even know that he had done this, and he wound up having Alzheimer's disease and then passed away. But I just, when I was reading this, I was just like a pit of my stomach. I'm like, oh my God. So I never saw it, but I smelled it. So.
Yeah, and to go back and read what he wrote, that he actually saw something about 8 feet up and didn't know what it was, and that's terrifying. It makes you wonder. I mean, the times he saw it before while he's working for the railroad, was that prior?
He was working for the electric company.
Oh, I'm sorry, for the electric company. Was that prior to that night you guys went out to see the lunar eclipse, or was that after?
Yes, that would have been like 25 years before that, when he was a lot younger. And then that would have been the one in Bridgeport, and the one in Southern California, he said, was in 1978.
Gotcha. So he must have seen these things. I mean, obviously had seen them before, and I'd imagine when he shined that light, he knew exactly what it was.
I'm sure he did, and I know, like you always say, don't wish for what, don't want to see one. I'm glad that he kept me from that. But after that happened, then he was a little more conscious of firearms. I mean, we always had guns around the house, but he wasn't a hunter. But I mean, he always, there was a rifle in the corner, and his handgun was around the house where he could get it. And then for him to tell me to walk around with a gun was so out of character for me. So, but I did it. But I don't go out at night and, oh my gosh.
Yeah, no kidding. That, well, at least he was, at least telling you, take a gun with you.
Yeah.
He must have, he must have known. He must have known what it was. And I'd imagine that was terrifying for him. And then all these years later, you crack open that book, and I'd imagine thinking back at that night, you were just like, oh my God. You know what I mean?
And I can remember the whole encounter, really well, because we've made a big deal about going down there, seeing the moon. And the one thing about living in a real rural area where there's no lights is that the moon and the stars are spectacular. And so I remember that night, and I remember that funky smell. So I'm glad I never turned around. So that's
yeah, that smell that you smell, I'm curious, what would you compare it to?
I've smelled skunk, and then you add body odor, and then just rank, musty, the most unpleasant smell I think I've ever come across in my life. It didn't smell like something that was dead. It just smelled like it was just a really bad smell. I mean, the skunk was the first whiff I got, and then it was just BO and just nastiness. So that's about the only way I can describe it. It's just rank. So something nobody would be attracted to. So over the course of the years that we lived there for 15 years, there was hunting around us, but there wasn't supposed to be any hunting like in the housing development. But every once in a while, we would find a dead deer carcass, and it would just be, I'm not sure how you field dress things out, but just the guts were gone, and it left, the whole body was still there.
Yeah, and that's interesting. I've heard that before from hunters, and they've asked me, well, what do you think this is? And they're like, whoever killed it left behind the best part of the meat. They basically took the guts. So do you find that from time to time?
And that was, one of them was within 100 yards of my house. And I was like, wow, who would kill a deer and not it? Because people up there are very, some of them are very needy, and, they take the deer to eat for food. But this one was just killed and left, and they found several of those over the years. So I'm not sure what was going on with that, but I'm thinking I know what it was now.
Yeah, looking back on that property, there was probably a lot more going on than what you thought.
Oh yeah, now if I had been aware, I probably couldn't have lasted 15 years. We were never there in the winter, so I can't say what was going on in the winter. We were just there for the golf, and so we were there in the spring and the summer and the fall. But yeah, it was. It just sends chills up the back of my neck now. So.
Yeah, I bet. Well, Kathy, thank you so much for coming on the show, and have a good time in Mexico, will you?
I will. You have a great time, and I love your show.
I appreciate it.
Okay, keep up the good work.
Thanks, Kathy. I really appreciate it. All right, let's wrap up tonight with Alec. Alec, thanks for being on tonight. I really do. Thank you for coming on, and appreciate you being here, man.
Sure, it's been great. It's been great listening to all your shows and whatnot. I've been really learned a lot, actually, of the experiences I've had that I really never knew what it was, kind of, and.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I want to kind of jump into the very first encounter. I think you said it was like 1978, 79. Tell us what you were doing and what you experienced.
Well, my friend and me were my sister and my mother were at the cabin that we had acquired, and they were from the family, and they were staying there. So my brother-in-law was, at that time, my friend, took off wandering up to Nevada City and whatnot around there, and it turned out to be turned into nighttime, so we drove around at night that night quite a bit, just driving around up in the mountains, and we ran into this, went up this really long, windy road. It just kept going and going forever, it seemed like, and it ended up at this campground entrance, and my brother-in-law did the gate. Before I knew it, he's got the gate undone, and we're in there. Then he bolted back up and put it together, like, gosh, I never seen anybody do that before. Anyway, we continued along about, I'd say, maybe a mile or so, and there were these campgrounds on the right side on the right side, and the lake was behind that, this lake. So we went to about the last campground. There were like little hedges on each side of each little bench. There's like a bench and a little barbecue there for the campground, and there were like hedges on either side of these, and there must have been about 6 of them. Anyway, so he backed in there and we sat on the tailgate and cracked a beer, and I heard this bullfrog croaking. I go, wow, that's a big bullfrog. It seemed like it's kind of an odd time of year. It seemed a little late in the year, but I could have been wrong. It was a really warm evening. I'm really not sure of the time of year. I think it was around September, which can be pretty warm. Anyway, so I took off towards the thing, and I noticed it was coming out. The frog was out on this point, rather. I would say, the point must have been about 50 foot long or so. And, I took about 5 minutes when I started getting near the reeds to where this frog was. I crouched really low, and I would spend about maybe 5 minutes just taking my time, getting really close to this frog, because I've been catching lots of bullfrogs, so I'm pretty good at it. And I got about 20, maybe 30 foot away, and this creature stood up and it had to go past me kind of as it was running away. So, because it's on this point, is the best I can describe. So it went by me, and then it went across the sand and up by these benches, and about that time, I'm starting to chase this thing. So it went by I stopped again, and it went by the park benches, and I yelled at it, hey, I want to talk to you. I know it sounds crazy, but this thing's running for me. I've always believed in Bigfoot. It's just like, always been way out there in the woods. My grandfather found footprints on the Klamath River in the late 30s, and so I'd been aware of it from that. But anyway, it stopped at the tree line, kind of where the sage. It was all dark and it had no flashlights, but it was a full moon, and it was a sandy beach where I saw this creature run across. And just about before it got to the wood line, after the benches, it turned, and there was this like white diamond shape on its chest. Best I could describe is imagine a piece of paper got stuck to its chest. Imagine it picked up a piece of paper somehow off the bench, and then the wind from running held it against its chest. I mean, it was so pronounced, this diamond white shape on its chest. And what's odd is I only...
Just like hair? Was it like...
I don't know. It was really bright. It could have been hair, but what's odd is it was so pronounced, the corners are so sharp. And when it stood up and ran, the only thing I can think is it didn't have its face to me. And I didn't see that till it got uprooted by the tree line and turned around. And then I saw the front of it, which had that diamond shape on it. It was still at an angle a bit. It could have been, I guess it could have been the moon. If they have really greasy hair up there, maybe. It could have, no, I don't think so. I think it must have been hair, but why it was so pronounced corners, I can't imagine.
Yeah, it's probably what you focused in on. So as you came upon this thing, and it stands up and takes off running, did you ever get a good look at the face or any other details? No,
it's all black. It is about 7 foot tall, I'd say, maybe. the first thing that came to my mind, my brother-in-law, he's a really tall fellow, but he was behind, way back, 300 yards the other way. And, I wanted to yell for him, "Hey, Bob, like, there's this creature."
What did you think it was? Did you think obviously it was a Sasquatch since you'd known?
I knew immediately what it was. Because I've been studying. I watched the Patterson film a long time ago, and I've always had a little keen interest because my grandfather, who I really admired all my life, who's been a fly fisherman, he's been fly fishing the Klamath River since the early 30s, and they were up there. They'd always bring the trailer up there and camp out for a month and can their fish and everything, and they found footprints in like the late 39 or 40s when my mother was a child up there, and they made them stay in the trailer, till I believe till they left. They weren't allowed to go outside.
Let me ask you this, Alec. How did that encounter from when you were a kid, how did that kind of affect you as far as going back out? Or did it not bother you?
Oh, not at all. But the last time I saw this Bigfoot, it's at the lake. It really didn't bother me much at all, but now I've been listening to shows and realized that these things are dangerous. And, there's there's a lot of them out there, I'm sure, because I've just had all these things I've heard in the woods all my life. I've been hunting deer since I was 10, 12 years old. And, I go out every summer with my pa hunting. And besides that, I've always been an outdoorsman. Like I took off this creek, I just get on my mountain bike and I can't stop and hike to the skyline and then walk back down again to get my bike, and I've always been one to go out by myself. And, if I was walking nowadays, I wouldn't want to be walking around out in the woods by myself, I don't think. And I even question some of the places I went, like back up here where that creek is, on the watershed area. You can see where there's a trail there that's been really established for years. Like there's that cabin back there, and I'm sure there's a ranger on horseback, because you see horse droppings back in there occasionally. I've maybe been there 15 times or so. And
is that where you found the tracks?
No, that's where I found the heart and the liver by the creek on this little sandy beach. So you're not supposed to go back there. It's a watershed area, but it was really spooky. You're not supposed to go back there, but it's on like watershed area, and it is patrolled by horses. I know it says it is on the gate there, but that was really creepy. And it looked like it'd been there for about less than an hour. Like it still hadn't dried off, completely, but it looked surgically removed. Though I don't know. I didn't look for cuts, but there was no veins hanging on or anything like that. It was just the heart and the liver.
Yeah.
One liver.
That is interesting. Those two organs that wouldn't last very long.
No footprints in the sand. Like whatever, like some freak thing, maybe it had washed down from upstream, but I can't imagine why in the heck someone would leave that there. That's the best part.
Yeah.
Unless some weird hippie sacrificing or doing some weird thing out there, but there were no footprints in the sand, and there's a pretty good sandy area because there's this boulder in front of that it's got a little kind of a cutout. It's not really a cave, but it's an overhang, and then there's this little sandy area. It's about 5 foot by 5 foot, and there's the little creek right there. And it was like right at the edge of the sand right there. They were just sitting right there.
Yeah, that is strange.
It's creepy. Anyway, I walked out there, and I didn't even look back. Usually I was like, should I look back? I look back, and you're just tripping yourself out doing that. Don't look back. Just get out of here. And it was after that I've had all these other experiences. The Bigfoot that I saw, the screaming at the door. That was horrible. My friend was in the trailer on the other side of the property. He claims he didn't hear it. So I'm thinking it must have been directed at my door, which I'd just gone in. And what's weird is no one had been on the property for about 2 years, and I just moved a big bobtail truck up there. And this property's like on a moat, sort of. There's like a irrigation canal that goes around it. So the house is like the front door is 12 foot from the irrigation ditch, and on the back side of the house, it's about 20 feet from the irrigation ditch. And it's like a moat. But anyway, the screaming was at the front door, and, it sounded like it was on the house side of the ditch, like right there. I always thought it was a mountain lion because my mother was born there, really close to there. And, they lived there till like the 1940s. And my mom telling me that mountain lion screaming there and how horrible sound it was. But this was no mountain lion, that's for sure.
Yeah, you can usually tell. You can usually tell when it's a mountain lion and when it's not a mountain lion.
Yeah, the bass, it was like an elephant. I mean, the amount of bass that, that it had.
Yeah.
It was just roaring, upset. It sounded really mad. Probably that I moved that truck up there for some reason. And no one's barely ever on the property there either. It's not very big. It's only 2 acres. But it may not matter.
Well, Alec, I appreciate you coming on the show, man, and sharing your encounters.
Sure, I appreciate you having me on here. And, that must say that Bigfoot that I saw, they got up and ran from me. It was like seeing a spacecraft or something. I just wow, it's real. It just made me a solid, I'm always down to earth person. And, I told my pa, he thought I was nuts and laughing and stuff.
Five, four, three, two, one.
Here in the near future, I'm moving to not only Friday night shows, but I'm moving to a Wednesday night show too as well. So I'm working on several encounters for you guys. And if you get a chance, go to the website. If you guys enjoy the show, if you guys love the show, if you would, sign up, become a subscriber on SasquatchChronicles.com. Help support the show. It really does help me out, guys. So I really do, guys and gals. So I really do appreciate it. And I appreciate you guys listening. Little things help, like on iTunes, leaving a review. I'm going to be doing some shout-outs with that. I'm going to be doing some shout-outs with Twitter. I know, like Lisa Shield on Twitter, she's constantly retweeting everything I put up. So thank you, Lisa, if you're out there listening. Thank you very much for doing that. Let's jump into it tonight. I want to welcome Bill Brock. He is the team leader of Monsters Underground on Destination America, as well as the founder of Team Rogue. Brock has made it his life mission to identify unknown creatures around the world. He has been all over the world looking for creatures from Bigfoot to the giant bat. Now he brings his hunt to Maine with Team Rogue. Team Rogue has been responsible for researching and publishing some of the best footage of a possible Bigfoot to be seen from Maine. Brock is an accomplished author and speaker, co-writer of a book focusing on the connection between the ancient mound builders and the paranormal. He has also given speeches to thousands of people on the Bigfoot and the origins of Sasquatch. He continues his journey researching cryptids and the paranormal in Maine and around the world. Bill, thanks for coming on the show, man. I appreciate you being here.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. Definitely. After that intro, it sounded pretty epic.
Well, you should be impressed with it. You wrote it. I'm just joking, man. No, I actually enjoy your YouTube. I know you do a lot on YouTube, and I just look up Bill Brock. Is there an easier way for people if they're trying to subscribe to you on YouTube? Because you do a lot of great interviews on your show.
Yeah, the best thing to do is just Google my name, Bill Brock, and my YouTube basically will just pop right up. And I'm the only guy with Bigfoot and whatnot on the YouTube description, so it's pretty easy to find.
Yeah, and you do a good job with those interviews. It's a lot harder, I think, and you might agree with me or disagree with me, Bill, but it's a lot harder than most people realize to interview someone and make it semi-entertaining. When you're talking to... You talk to a lot of researchers on your show. I know you had Steve Coles on, and Steve's always entertaining, but you're talking about back in 2008 with Rick Dyer, but it was just a real fascinating interview for me. I mean, I sat and listened to the whole thing, and I was just interested by it. So you do a really good job with the YouTube thing, man. I appreciate what you do.
Yeah, thanks, dude. And I don't just interview other researchers. I interview a lot of eyewitnesses. I probably have more eyewitness videos on my YouTube channel than anyone, I would think. And that is also like an art form, trying to learn how to interview someone without feeding them answers. That's also, tough to do. And I'm doing this stuff in the field. I usually have someone out there filming it right as we're doing it, so it's kind of cool. I really like the feel of like just bringing a documentary of exactly what's going on and how that investigation is going to YouTube. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, you're right. When you interview a witness, and I try, and I'm sure I've been guilty of feeding information unintentionally to witnesses, and I try to be real careful how I word questions. But it is kind of a strange art form. I've had witnesses on before that, in my personal opinion, I think this is a wild animal that we're dealing with. And again, at the end of the day, I could be wrong. And I'm not too proud to say that I could be wrong, but I think it's a wild animal. And you talk to a lot of witnesses.
So hold up, man. I gotta stop you just because, like, I'm curious now. Do you mean a wild animal like, let's say, like a dog or a owl or a moose? Like, what do you mean?
Well, I would say wild animal like a chimpanzee or a bear, or I don't want to say smarter than a dog. You've never met my dog. My dog's as smart as they come. He's a genius. But I would say more like a wild animal. I know some people think they're people, and I'm okay with whatever everyone else wants to believe. But in my mind, I still think wild animal. Like when I have witnesses on the show, I always tell them treat it like the same way you would a grizzly bear. And we can get into how you feel about it, Bill. I know you're on the East Coast, and I can give you my feeling about the East Coast and what people run into out there. It's a little bit different than what people run into out in the Pacific Northwest.
Is that where you are? I really just don't even know where you're at.
I'm in an undisclosed location.
All right. So I have a friend of mine that is his father's the chief of the Ojibwa Indians. And so, like, I was talking to him about this, and basically, make a long story short, they said it was part of the woods, such as the owl, the bear, the moose. So, like, they accept it as being just part of the woods, part of nature. And so I always thought that was kind of an interesting concept. It's just like this thing lives with nature in unison. And that's really cool. That's an important thing to think about when you really think about whether Sasquatch could be real or not.
Yeah, no, I'm here in Washington State. But yeah, no, I really think it is a wild animal people run into. And I always tell them treat it like you would a grizzly bear. When you run into a grizzly bear, you're not going to walk up and pet it on the head because you might get killed. And I kind of think the same thing applies with these things. You're not going to walk up and have an apple in one hand and be petting it on the other hand, with, while it's eating an apple out of your hand. I mean, it's ridiculous to think that.
Right. Do you think it has the same amount of intelligence as we do?
Well, intelligence is kind of an odd word to use, because when I look at intelligence, I'll give you a perfect example. Could my dog sit down here and do this interview? No. Do I think my dog is stupid? No. Do I think my dog is intelligent? Yeah. I can say different phrases like, do you want to go for a ride? Do you want a treat?
All right, let's take problem-solving capabilities. I think that is like the most important thing, because with Sasquatch, it is problem-solving constantly in order to basically stay elusive, essentially. Do you think it has the same kind of problem-solving skills that we do as modern humans?
Yeah, I think it thinks like we do in a lot of ways. I think it's smarter in the sense of its environment. For example, there was one time I was hunting, and I was wearing camo, and I had my rifle, and I was sitting there next to the trail in the bushes, and I see these two hunters coming down the trail. Well, I decided to sit there like a stone. Those guys never saw me. They passed by me at 10 feet, never even saw me. So I think they're smart with their environment. They know how to back away from a situation. I think they're highly intelligent, I guess, to answer your question.
All right, so to me, man, all right, Wes, all right, check this out. I think what you just described is what I think these things are. I think they're Neanderthal hybrids. I think that these things are the majority Neanderthal with essentially the 3 to 5% human DNA that we find in ourselves as Neanderthal, you know what I mean? And so I think what we're dealing with is something that's extremely intelligent. I believe that Neanderthals had probably equal problem-solving capabilities as modern humans. They had definitely a larger brain mass. They were excellent hunters, so you were just talking about how you were able to basically elude other hunters by just sitting still. Well, these things are going to be masters of their environment, man. These things have basically evolved in parallel with modern humans, but in the forest. Modern humans, we got like computers, cars, airplanes, you name it, man. We got it, you know? And these things, I think, evolved in parallel in the forest, and basically they are masters of their environment. And I think that I think that's why we haven't been able to find them, you know?
Well, I think that they have been found is the thing, is I think they have been found several times over. You know, I've talked to witnesses that have been at the scene of a snowplow killing one, or not killing one, but injuring one. I've talked to people who've shot them. And what's interesting, though, I thought you might say that, especially with the location you're in. When I talk to people on the East Coast, Maine, New Hampshire, New York, a lot of what you'll find, and I don't know if you've talked to people outside of your area, Bill, but in that general region of the United States, what I'll generally find when I talk to people is they'll say it looked like a person, like a Neanderthal, like what we perceive to be a Neanderthal, the reconstructions they've done. But what's interesting is when you start to go down south, Mississippi, Oklahoma, Texas, a lot of these areas, they'll say it looks like a chimpanzee. Rarely will you get someone that'll say, well, it looked like a person. Most of the time people will say it looked like a cross between a chimpanzee and a person. And a lot of times here in the Pacific Northwest, what you'll find is people will say it looked like an ape. What you would see as a half man, half ape type looking creature wasn't really human. Most people here and I'm talking in general terms. I'm not talking every time. But generally speaking, people will say it looked like an ape. What they saw was an ape. It's been confused as well, I thought maybe an ape was loose here in the Pacific Northwest. And so you'll find these differences depending on the region that someone's in. I mean, you could be right at the end of the day. It could be, who the hell knows what a Neanderthal really was?
Well, have you ever heard of the Bergman rule?
No.
Well, there's this rule in biology. Basically, it says that anything further from the equator gets a larger body mass. Anything close to the equator thins down. I mean, that's, to make a long story short, that's what it is. So what I've always kind of thought is maybe we're looking at that Bergman's rule in effect, So, like, if we're seeing these smaller creatures down, as far as the skunk apes is concerned, and they're known to be a little bit thinner, smaller in body mass, a little faster from what I understand than what we see up here in the north. Maybe it's just literally that Bergman's rule in effect. Things down there are thinner and things up here are larger in body mass. And then also there's been theories tossed around out there. We're dealing with like a pre-human, and there were different types of pre-humans, And so like if you would have had a certain type of pre-human isolated and it was able to find a way to have small family groups hidden out in the middle of the forest for 35,000 years or whatever it is, they may evolve a little bit differently in different climates, Yeah,
that's interesting. Well, one of the things I found when I talked to witnesses, and I want to talk about your encounters too as well, but one of the things I found when I talked to witnesses, and you might be right about the Bergman rule, that kind of makes some sense when I think about it. But what's interesting is when you talk to witnesses, I'll always ask about the face. Tell me what you saw. What did the face look like? And what's interesting is on the East Coast, a lot of the witnesses say, basically you take a human face, throw it on a huge hairy body, and that's kind of what I saw. Or you take a picture of like a Neanderthal, or what the scientists have reconstructed as this is what a Neanderthal looks like, and people will say, that's what I saw. But if you go down south and you show them that, it's not even close. They're like, no, it's more chimp-like. The face looked more like a chimp. Like I had an ambulance driver one time, their ambulance was attacked. And I asked him specifically, what did the face look like? And he said it looked like a huge chimpanzee. Imagine like a chimpanzee on steroids. That was this thing. It had a human nose, but the face looked very chimp-like. And so I've come to the conclusion that there has to be different types out there. And some of the military people I've talked to said there is different types. But just based on witnesses' descriptions, now does that mean that it's not some pretty human? No. It could very well could be. But when you talk to people and they talk about the face, it's interesting when you talk to witnesses, and their behaviors are different. You'll find them to be more aggressive down south. For whatever reason, they tend to be way more aggressive down south than they are, let's say, where you're at, or where I'm at.
Right.
You know, we do get aggressive reports, but not like they do down south.
Yeah. Have you heard of the artist Fred Dunn?
I have, yeah.
Okay, so Fred was nice enough to draw a Neanderthal based on the Neanderthal skull, and he basically drew the skull. And I asked him to do this because I was doing a video about Neanderthals. So anyway, he drew the Neanderthal skull to scale, and then drew the face over it as more influenced, I guess, by like a chimpanzee. And what he came up with was what I hear from everyone when they talk about what they saw in Bigfoot, you know. And I think it's really interesting when you do that, when you do a recreation with a Neanderthal skull and give it more of like a monkey kind of face, and then show that to people that have had these experiences, and you wouldn't believe how many people will say, wow, you know, that looks just exactly like what I saw. And you were talking about, you know, how people talk about the different faces. Well, up here in Maine, we have the Durham gorilla story. Basically, back in the 70s, basically the whole town of Durham, Maine, saw a Sasquatch. And I talked to some of the witnesses, actually their families, and they all told me it looked like a gorilla. And then I talked to a guy locally that saw one fairly recently, and he immediately said it looked like a gorilla. So, you know, I'm having people here say that the facial features are more of like, you know, a gorilla chimpanzee kind of thing. So, you know, I don't know what we're dealing with, but it's definitely, to me, leaning more towards like a hominid chimpanzee faced Neanderthal, you know, like that's kind of what it seems like. It's crazy, man, but I really think that's what we're dealing with.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree. I always wanted to ask you what got you into this. You know, I've talked to like Peter Byrne, and I don't really understand Peter. Like I'm sure you know who Peter Byrne is. I was teasing him last time him and I talked. I was like, why didn't you become a mechanic? I mean, you've never had a sighting. Why are you even interested in this? So if I didn't have my own encounter, I'd be off doing other more important things. I sure as hell wouldn't be doing this. But after you have a sighting, it becomes kind of an addiction. Like, what did I see? What did I experience? And I always joke with Peter because he really hasn't had, I don't think, anything strange happen in his life. Yeah, he's this researcher. I'm not breaking Peter's balls. I actually love the man. He's a very nice man. But in your own case, what got you interested in this, Bill? Did you have an encounter?
Yes, I did, but to this day, I don't know what it was. I have no idea. I can tell you what happened, but I don't know what it was. I wish I did, because that's kind of why I'm doing what I'm doing. So anyway, I was in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, and I was fishing a creek there, and I think it's called the Rubidoux Creek. Anyway, I was fishing, looking for trout. They had just stocked trout. Sitting there catching fish, and I noticed what I think is a bear downstream from me, probably, I don't know, 200 yards. And I stand there watching the thing, and I'm seeing it like eat fish, you know, and I'm watching the back of it. All I see is this hairy mass, which I think is a bear. And so I cruise down a little bit further, and it evidently hears me walking through the water. It shot up this hill on two legs, both, you know, rear legs going. And it did go to all fours as it was going up the hill, continued up this super steep, like, it was like a sandy hill. And then once it got up to the top, it took off again, and it was again on back legs. And it continued to run, I don't know, as far as I could see. And so I kind of freaked out. I was like, what is this? You know? And so I ran after the thing as far as I could, just to try to get an eye on it and tell what the hell it was. But I never really was able to tell really what it was. I didn't know if it was a bear. To this day, I don't know if it was a bear that, just because of the angle of the hill and because it was in water, it may have went to its back legs to run. That's the only thing that really made sense at the time, that it was just a bear that ran on its rear legs. But I'm telling you, I couldn't tell the difference. Like, I don't know what it was. And so that kind of like really sparked my interest. I was like, well, is Bigfoot real? And then I started like getting into it. I started looking into the history of Sasquatch, and it really just kind of snowballed from there. And then I started getting in all these other weird things, especially Mothman. The Mothman, that's something I'm totally into. I don't want to get started on that too much because, this is Sasquatch Chronicles. But, yeah, so the Mothman's interesting to me because my dad actually worked at a gas station that was at the end of the Silver Bridge when it fell. And so, that kind of had a real connection for me. And he used to tell me stories of like all these tubes basically that connected all of the igloos that he used to play in when he was a kid. And so I used to hear all these stories, growing up about, the TNT areas and how haunted they were and they were sketchy, blah, blah, blah. So as I got older, I started really researching it and really got into the Mothman. And recently a buddy of mine, AJ Marston, and I, we went down there to kind of investigate. And we legit, honest to God, filmed a UFO. And we filmed this thing for like 3.5 hours, like legit, like we really did. And it was amazing, man. It was the first real like UFO experience I've ever had. And it was legit, man. It was definitely in the air for 3.5 hours bouncing around. It was crazy.
That is crazy. That's interesting. Your dad was there during the time of the Mothman. Let me ask you about the UFO. I realize it's Sasquatch Chronicles, but I got to ask, what did it look like when you saw it in the air? What were you actually, for the audience, kind of describe what you saw?
Well, give a quick background. We were down there basically to film a documentary about the Mothman, and we had a theory about what we thought it was, and this kind of screwed up our whole theory when this happened. So we were in the TNT area at about 2-ish a.m., I think it was, and we were just kind of cruising around, driving. We decided to stop for a minute and get out and just walk the roads. And we had our night vision gear. We had all our stuff carrying it down the road. And I spotted what looked like just a really bright star in the sky ahead of us. And we both saw it, kind of looked at it for a minute. And then we realized it was kind of bouncing around. It wasn't stationary. So we kept walking towards it and just watching this thing. And it was definitely bouncing around, bouncing up and down. And it looked like it was changing intensity as far as like how much light was coming out of it. And then it was also changing color. It was changing color from like an orangish color to a red, white, I don't know, it was just changing colors. And it was also rotating, which was weird. So it would look like 3 orbs that rotated, changed color, and changed the light intensity. And these orbs were so close that you couldn't really tell one from the other. It was really strange. And so, yeah, we watched this thing for a few minutes, and we get our cameras out, and we start filming it. And we continue filming this thing, thinking that it was going to go away, do something. Well, it ended up going from probably about a mile, I'd say, maybe not quite that far. Yeah, it's called a mile away from us to probably 2 miles away from us. And at about 2 miles, there was a coal-fired power plant there. And it literally hovered over top of this coal-fired power plant for the rest of the time, which was, I don't know, we ended up getting 3.5 hours worth of footage out of it. And it ended up shooting off into the distance, just boom, man. I mean, it took right off. It was like there and then not there. And we have it all on video.
Yeah, that's interesting. Woody and I saw something like that. My brother, we were riding our motorcycles, and, well, we don't have to go into it, but we saw something similar to that in the sky. And at first I thought it was a satellite. And the more we looked at it, I was like, no, that's not a satellite. And then we're like, what planet is that? And it wasn't 3 orbs. It was just one, but it was just bouncing all over the sky, doing maneuvers no plane could do, no helicopter could do. And it was silent. That was the other weird thing, is it was completely silent as it was bouncing around in the sky.
Yeah, this didn't make any noise either. And when I say there was multiple orbs, well, we didn't really see that with our naked eye. You could only see it when we took the video camera and zoomed the video camera all the way in, and then you could kind of like see different orbs together. It was strange.
That is strange. I wanted to go back to your encounter, and I actually want to talk about the Mothman, because I have
a better encounter if you want to talk about one. All right, so the best encounter I've ever had, which is pretty freaking epic, man. In Mayaca, Florida, we got a report saying that there was like this Bigfoot running around down there chasing deer, trying to catch them and eat them, right? This video pops up of this thing running around in a field in Mayaca. So Stacy Brown and I somehow get together. Stacy Brown actually won Bigfoot bounty there. Stacy Brown I hooked up with him. I went down there, flew into friggin' Tampa and picked up by no other than Tim Fasano himself in the cab. Take Tim Fasano's cab down to
he's a Bigfoot researcher for people listening. Tim Fasano.
And so we get down to Mayaca. We get there, hook up with this guy, go out, talk to an eyewitness. The eyewitness narrows down our search area. We basically go out that night looking for something. We made a decision to push our way through the forest in the middle of the night in Florida where there's alligators and friggin' everything wants to kill you. So we're pushing our way through the forest, man. And I get a heat signature on the thermal that I'm using. And we're in teams of two. Myself and Stevie Strings was one team. Josh and another guy was another team. And Stacy was down at the other end. It was Josh and Emmett. So Stevie walks up to this tree where I see a heat signature. And I kind of see this heat signature pop out the other side. Then I realize there's two. I'm like, what the heck? So I'm thinking it's probably just like a couple porcupines or something. He gets up to it, and I'll be damned if whatever it was didn't run off from that tree right directly towards our other team. Josh put up his thermal. It ran so close to him that it literally filled up his thermal, took off towards Stacy Brown. Stacy couldn't get his thermal up in time to video it, but he was able to hear the thing run towards him and take off. So after that, like all of our hearts are going, I'm like, holy crap, did you see that? I'm tripping. And then all of a sudden I hear Stacy start yelling, snake, snake. And I'm like, what? And then I hear him go, oh no, it's a bird. And then he goes, oh no, it's crap. This thing took a crap when it took off. And so we ended up getting DNA off of that. And we didn't send it in yet. So I don't know what it was, but we definitely have DNA off of that. And I'm excited to hopefully get it sent in and find out what it was that we experienced, because that was legit, man. Something about 7 foot tall ran from the tree that was right in front of me, right towards another group of people, and then towards another guy, and then took off into the woods. It was nuts.
Yeah, that is crazy. And I don't know how great a DNA you get off scat. I mean, I'm not a...
Well, see, our problem, it's embarrassing that this happened, but it happened. After that kind of experience, we should have had DNA off of it and able to prove without a shadow of a doubt that Bigfoot's real, because we had the perfect sighting. Everything happened perfectly, but we made the mistake on how we collected the DNA. So I didn't know all this stuff until after we screwed up. So basically, when you collect DNA off of poo, it works like a big bulldozer. It's pushing all those DNA cells that you need out first. So you have to actually collect the DNA off the front of the poop and not the rear of the poop. And we had no idea. So we ended up collecting DNA from the wrong side. And so that's part of the reason it never got sent in, because we couldn't be sure that we even did it right. And you only have so many, Stacy only has so many free DNA samples that he's allowed to turn in. And since we made a mistake, he was kind of apprehensive about turning it in.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. Going back to your first encounter, did you really think it was a bear running on 2 legs?
I honestly didn't know, and I still don't know. It was it wasn't dark. It was like dusk, so I couldn't really make out what it was perfectly. All I know is whatever it was ran on 2 legs, dropped to 4 legs as it went up the incline, and then went back to 2 legs and then took off.
Yeah, and which most bears don't do. I mean, honestly, most bears... It's pretty rare to see a bear up on 2 legs.
Well, I tried to rationalize it, and I was doing the same things that I hear other eyewitnesses do. You try to rationalize what you see.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And so for me, I was thinking maybe it was easier for the bear to run on 2 legs through water in deep sand than it was 4. I don't know. I was just grasping. I still am. Because I'd really like to know what I saw, and I'd like to try to keep an open mind either way, but that's what drives me to do this. I want to know the answers. I want to know if Bigfoot is real, and if it is real, what is it? What is this creature that's cruising out in the woods? What is it? And so that's really what drives me is that question. What is this thing that we're dealing with?
Yeah, I think that's a question that drives all of us is what is this thing? For everyone who's ever had an encounter, that's the main question everyone always asks is what is this thing? And everyone has their own opinions. Everyone says they're people. Some people say they're apes. Some people say they're this. At the end of the day, no one really knows. We can kind of guess. I've even given out my own theories based on my own experience and other eyewitnesses' experiences and said, this is what I think it is. But at the end of the day, I realize I could be wrong. I could be way wrong on what I think it is. Tell the audience about the show you do.
All right, yeah, Monsters Underground. Monsters Underground was filmed about 2 years ago now. Wow, it's been a long time. It's been on Destination America and Discovery Channel. It aired first on Discovery, and then they switched it over to Destination America. It's in reruns right now. About once a month, you can check like a marathon out. And our show was basically what it says, Monsters Underground. We chased around all kinds of strange monsters in different caves across the world, man. It was pretty awesome, actually. We didn't really get any real evidence. It's tough to do. But, we had a blast filming. We went all over the place, man. It was definitely a good time.
Yeah, it sounds like it. It sounds like it. I've been approached for those different shows, and I've always wanted to do a show that was based more than just Bigfoot, based on other things. I've talked to people who've ran into all kinds of strange creatures, everything from thunderbirds to stuff that it just seems so unbelievable. But it's interesting to talk to those people. It's like, well, you have my attention. What did you see? And they'll go into full detail on what they saw. And so does the show, it's more than, it sounds like just Bigfoot. It sounds like you go after everything.
Yeah, and I was really happy about that because I don't want to get pigeonholed in just looking for Bigfoot because I'm totally interested in all kinds of cryptids, especially like Native American history, specifically the mound builders. I really like the opportunity to go and check out all of these different kinds of cryptids because they're all really interesting.
Tell us about the Mothman for the audience. I'm sure most people know about the Mothman, but tell us what you know about the Mothman, and then tell us about your dad being at the gas station.
Yeah, the Mothman. It was in the late 60s, basically, this Mothman was seen around Point Pleasant by a bunch of people in the TNT area specifically. And right after that, the Silver Bridge fell. They felt the Mothman may be some type of like harbor of sorrows, So like whenever the Mothman shows up, bad things happen. So yeah, when the Silver Bridge fell, my dad happened to be working at the gas station, and from what I hear, he helped pull a few people out of the river. From what I hear, so that's pretty cool. So yeah, that was always something I always heard from him. And yeah, as far as the Mothman goes, this researcher John Keel, he did a bunch of research into the Mothman and ended up thinking that it was probably some type of alien creature. And after my experience seeing friggin' UFO, because that's really what it was, right at the TNT area, it makes me wonder, is the Mothman some type of alien creature? I don't know, but I'm still going back. Like I'm going to be speaking at the Mothman Festival this year about it. So I keep going back to try to find out the answer.
Yeah, when is the Mothman Festival? I've always wanted to go to that.
Man, it's awesome. It's in September. I believe it's the second or third weekend. People can Google it, the Mothman Festival in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. And I'll be speaking there. Last year, Ken and Lyle were there, Ken Gephardt and Lyle Blackburn. That was a lot of fun. And, yeah, you get to go down there. It's a big festival. They close down pretty much the whole town. It's not much of a town, but they close it all down for Mothman. And it's really cool. They have a lot of live music and, food. And down at the State Theater, they have different cryptozoologists come down and speak. It's definitely a good time. It's really cool.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I know I've always wanted to go to that. I've looked into the Mothman. I always look into weird things, on my own time. Outside of Bigfoot, I'm always looking into weird cryptids. And when I looked into the Mothman, I thought the people that actually saw it are so consistent, it's almost ridiculous. From one guy to a next, or one woman to another woman, or they're very consistent on what they saw. And it's not like one guy's way off base on what he saw. They all kind of saw the same thing, and they all kind of described the same thing. Even law enforcement officials described this thing. And I know that bridge fell, and they blamed it on the Mothman and said it was because of him. And then I think after the bridge fell, no one ever saw the Mothman again. Is that correct?
There were scattered sightings, but nothing like right before the bridge fell. It was just like this mass sighting. Like I don't remember how many people saw it, but it was more than just one or two sightings for sure.
Have you ever taken any real aggressive reports from Maine?
Oh yeah, definitely. Only one. Like out of all the reports I've ever had here in Maine, I've only got one that seemed aggressive at all, and it was one of the most interesting, I guess, reports I've ever had. Here in Maine, we have Mount Katahdin. Katahdin was thought to be pretty much just ran by these little ape-like creatures that the natives called Pamula. And the Pamula was kind of a cross between like a Sasquatch and like a chimpanzee. It wasn't giant, but it wasn't small like a chimp either. But so anyway, that was kind of a little bit about the Pamula. And these kids said that they saw one up there. What they told me happened was they were hiking the backside of Katahdin, and you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to go up the backside because they want you to pay and kind of keep tabs on you whenever you climb the mountain because it is dangerous. So they were hiking up the backside so they didn't have to pay. I guess they got about halfway up the mountain, started hearing like twigs break, and they just knew something was behind them. And there were 4 kids, 2 males and 2 females. They continued up the hill, and I guess they got tired after a while and went to stop. And this thing got close to them, close enough where they could see it. It was kind of like hiding behind trees, and occasionally it would come out and make a noise. And so I guess the 2 girls got really scared, and they started running. 2 guys, gave chase. They took off right behind the girls, and they ran until they couldn't run anymore. They said they stopped, and this thing came out and then like ran around them all super aggressive and like making like ape-type sounds, smacking the ground, throwing sticks at them, just like getting crazy. They said this thing ran around him making sounds super aggressive, just beating on the ground, acting just like a mad chimp, And they said this thing did that for a while, and a couple guys got up and yelled at it, and it took off. And these kids took off back down the hill and left. That was the most aggressive story I've ever heard since being here in Maine.
Makes you wonder with that type of behavior if it was just displaying a territorial display or, hey, I'm bigger than, or if it was more or less for the women. Makes you wonder why it was doing that.
Well, the natives always said that they were protecting the top of Katahdin, so they didn't really, I don't know, so basically the natives say that if you go onto Katahdin, this is going to happen to you. And it did this because they were protecting the mountain. So if you go by that, they were being aggressive over territorial issues. I don't know how much I buy into all that, but these kids really seemed that they were telling the truth. So, maybe it is true.
That's very interesting. This whole subject, it's interesting as you talk to different witnesses from even outside of your own area. It kind of gives you a perspective on what you're dealing with. A lot of the behaviors that you see and you hear from your own area, you'll find in other places. Stuff I hear in Washington, I hear in Texas, I hear in Florida, I hear in New Hampshire, I hear in Maine. But the physical descriptions is the only thing that throws me off. It's just a different type of creature almost that you're dealing with. From in Florida, they'll say orangutan to, sometimes you'll get some of the human stuff in Florida too as well. But it makes you wonder if they're adapting based on the area that they're in.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was kind of talking about earlier. Something is going to evolve differently that's lived in, let's say, the swamps of Florida for 28,000 years than it would in the tundra of Antarctica for 28,000 years. They're really going to evolve differently, and they're going to end up very different creatures. They could be all pre-humans. They could be all from the same type of ancestor. And just because of where they are, they evolve differently.
Yeah, and it makes me wonder on size, too. I know, down in the South, I'll get 6 to 8 feet tall. And here in the Pacific Northwest, that's a small one. 6 to 8 feet tall is actually a pretty small one. I would say minimum, people say at least 8 feet tall here in the Pacific Northwest. But it kind of makes sense, right? I mean, like here in Washington State, you could be 10 feet tall, weigh 1,500 pounds, and there's more than enough places to hide. There's more than enough food. There's more than enough water. But down in, like, Texas, that might be a different story, down there. It's almost like you would have to evolve to be a little bit smaller, still bigger than your average man, but a little bit smaller in that area based on the environment.
Yeah, our size is also based on our food intake as well as oxygen level, and that's really what determines our size. So if something is living up there, it's definitely going to be able to eat more than it does in Texas, I would think, just because of the different type of diet. I mean, I don't know this to be true, but I know that, our size is determined by oxygen levels and food intake, so maybe it's just that much different there.
Yeah. Well, Bill, how can people find you online, keep up to date with what you're doing?
On Facebook, it's just look up my name, Bill Brock, and friend me up on Facebook and YouTube. That's really the best two places. I'm usually one place or the other. I'm on Facebook most of the time, and that's probably the best way to get a hold of me. And if you have any kind of sightings or anything you'd like to talk about, feel free to send me a message, and I always try to get back to everybody.
Well, I appreciate being on the show, man.
Cool. All right. Well, I appreciate you having me, man. Oh, yeah. Before I get off here, I just wanted to say hey to all those guys from Trucks Gone Wild. That's who I actually was told. These guys told me I need to be on your show, so I got a hold of you, man. And I'm going to be filming with Trucks Gone Wild here for a little while, so I'm kind of stoked about that. But again, if anybody wants to contact me, look me up, Bill Brock, Team Rogue. And thanks again, Wes, for having me, man.
Thanks, Bill. Appreciate you being on. And that was Bill Brock, the team leader of Monsters Underground on Destination America. Check out his YouTube. Look up Bill Brock. It's one of the only Bigfoot ones on there. So if you get a chance, check it out. Subscribe to him on YouTube. Next up on the show, I want to welcome Melissa and Carrie George. Melissa is the author of Sasquatch and Native Truth. You can get it on Barnes & Nobles. You can get it at your local bookstore. You can find it at a lot of different places. Melissa and Carrie, thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having us on.
And I know it's been tough to get between your schedule and my schedule, Melissa. I know it's been kind of tough to get you on. I know we've been talking about it for weeks, so definitely glad that you are here. And you have a book out, Sasquatch, The Native Truth, and I know you can get it at Barnes & Nobles. You can get it at Amazon. If people go to their local bookstores. Again, it's called Sasquatch and Native Truth. And if you would, for the audience, just kind of walk through the book a little bit. Explain what someone could expect by picking this up.
Well, it's told by a Native American lady. She contacted me with her story. And after I heard her story, I believe part of it is in my second book.
Yes.
The Sasquatch Chronicles. Bigfoot Chronicles.
Yeah. The second book of that.
Yeah, she gave me a condensed version for that book, and
it takes you into the secret side of the reservations.
After reading what the little bit she had given me, I contacted her actually and got her to go into a little more detail, and then she was interested in me telling the whole story, so I worked very closely with her to get the details of the story, and I don't know, I've never experienced a Bigfoot story like this one, and it left me reeling when I finished writing her story, and it's hard to get past it.
It is, and I even think about her a lot.
Yeah. We try to stay in touch with her and make sure everything's going okay, because her people did not want her telling the story at all, and she did go through some repercussions for telling this.
Now, when you say the secret side of the Native Americans, what do you mean by that?
The legends that these people, they grow up knowing, but they're not supposed to talk to the outside world about. They're not supposed to confirm the existence of these creatures. But she did that, and she wanted the world to know, and that's a reservation secret.
Now, when you guys spoke to this woman, for the audience, without giving too much away from the book, Can you give us a cliff notes of what happened to this woman? Just kind of a sample of what this woman went through.
Okay, she grew up on the reservation. She didn't know as she was growing up, but they did a lot of hunting and fishing and gardening. That's where most of their food come from. Her father would clean the fish and throw the heads and scales and stuff in a bucket. If he cleaned a rabbit, the innards and stuff would be thrown in a bucket. And the bucket was always taken down to the end of the yard and set on a stump.
Almost like an offering.
And I guess that's what you would call your habituation now. And back then she wasn't aware. But, yeah, it was like an offering to the Bigfoot.
When you say offering, to make them stay away or make them... Why would they do this? Why would they feed them?
I guess so that they did find that produce was going missing out of their garden.
Yeah.
So I think that they did this as a way to keep that at bay so that there's not as much going missing so that the family still has enough to feed their family.
Well, it's kind of like if you feed the stray cats down at the edge of the woods, you know, they're going to stay in the woods. They're not going to come up in your yard, you know.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've talked to another Native American gentleman who lives in Chehalis, and he kind of did the same thing. But his grandmother told him to do it so that they would leave the fit. They had like a shack. They would hang dry meat, and they would do it to make them leave the shack alone. And there was a couple of years where they didn't leave food out, and the shack was actually torn down by these creatures. So that's kind of interesting that they had that, I don't want to say relationship, but they had that mentality of, let's leave the guts and everything over here, and maybe they'll leave us alone. Did she actually ever see the creature?
Unfortunately, yes. She and her sister both did. I don't want to give too much away, you know, of the ending of the book. But yes, she came face to face with him. Yeah.
And one question I want to ask you about her encounter, and I don't want to give too much away of the book, but did she describe how did she describe the creature that she saw?
8-9 foot tall, dark, covered in fur. She said the hair looked choppy, like it would be maybe 4 or 5 inches long, but like a bad 80s haircut, I guess. Choppy all over. Black skin on the hands, the face.
Did she describe it more of human-like? Did she describe it more as primate-looking? How did she...
She described it as a monster, basically. The almond-shaped head. But at the time of her encounter, it was actually after her dog. So I think in what was going on, and at the time it was complete chaos when she was face-to-face. So there was a lot going on right then, but she gave a great description.
And Melissa, what got you into this? What got you interested in hearing people's stories and writing books about people's encounters? Because as you and I both know, whether you do a show, I'm sure a book is even worse than a show. It's very time-consuming. It's very emotionally draining. I know you've put out many books beyond this one. What got you interested in doing this?
Well, Carrie and I are paranormal investigators. We're also founders of a cryptid crew. So I guess...
And we came face-to-face with them ourselves.
Yeah, we've seen them ourselves. So in the beginning, my first book was paranormal. We had a lot of paranormal stuff actually going on, and I was documenting day-to-day on a blog. And I had someone approach me and want to write a book about my blog. So we went in together and we did this first book. And then I came out with a second one on my own. And then the next book was our Bigfoot encounters and stuff going on, Bigfoot, and our team and what we do. And then I had someone approach me with a story, and I'm like, I'm really into the true stories.
Because these people need to tell their story.
Yeah, yeah.
And a lot of them, they feel like it needs to be out there, but they don't want to face the ridicule of putting their story out there publicly. So they reach out to Melissa to help them
So when they reach out to me with a story, I have to decide first if I want to do it or not. And then I send Carrie on a wild goose chase and have her contact some of their people to make sure that we're actually doing a true story and we're not being bluffed. And then it's like you said, it's very time consuming. You have to work very, very closely with the person telling the story. You want to get as much detail as you can, and sometimes that's hard because they've been through a trauma and they might not want to bring out as much detail, but it's something you have to work very closely with them. And then it leaves you reeling when you're done with a book that they've been through so much.
Yeah, it's kind of a fine line between a conversation and interrogation. It's this very fine line that you have to walk when you're talking to people.
That's right.
And I got to ask about the paranormal stuff. When you guys, like ghost hunting, is that what you guys did?
Yes.
And see, I have been a case manager for almost 6 years now.
Yes.
With 2 different teams. So that's kind of the reason that she sends me in, is because I'm so used to interviewing the clients and really asking the questions that they really don't want to answer. So over the years, I've gotten used to doing that. So I kind of know the questions to ask and what direction to go in.
I'm the quiet author, and she's my people person.
Yeah, I hear you. It's and I want to come back to that because I got to ask you guys the scariest paranormal encounter you guys investigated or that you encountered or spoke to a witness. But before we come back to that, I'm sure most of my audience will be beating me up over that, but I got to ask because it fascinates me because I honestly think that stuff goes on, and I think it's real stuff that goes on. It's stuff I try and avoid because I do believe that it's real. But going back to your guys' Bigfoot encounter, for the audience, just kind of walk them into what happened with you guys. You guys came face to face with one, a Sasquatch?
Oh, yes. Actually, we came face to face with one, and then we had a pretty rough encounter with one night. It was highly aggressive.
2 different nights we had aggressive encounters.
And we were in the wrong place at the wrong time. That encounter almost made me stop what I was doing. I considered leaving the team altogether. It took me a while to push past that. The first one that we saw, we were out in the woods, and actually my husband and Carrie were walking along in front of me, and I'm trying to turn around and take pictures behind us as we're walking, so that kind of left me lagging behind them. I had turned at one point to take pictures behind us, and I see this tree by itself. It's got brush around it that's about waist high. Everything's real growed up, and this tree is just waving back and forth badly, and there's no wind. So I turned and yelled at them. I said, hey, we've got some kind of movement over here. And naturally, I'm thinking there's some kind of an animal in the brush, you know. Well, they head back with their cameras, and naturally at that point my camera would die. So they head back for their cameras, and I'm backing up the hill so I could see the brush better as they're going down toward it. And I saw something brown, so naturally I'm thinking there's an animal in this brush, and I tell them, I said, I see something moving, and it's moving off to some higher brush, and it had to be on all fours to begin with. Mm-hmm. And then it moves into some bigger brush, and I'm backing up trying to look, and my husband's yelling at me to give him directions. How far away? How far away? And it steps out into this opening in the brush that I could see shoulder up and looks me straight in the face. And I couldn't say anything. I froze. I absolutely froze.
And when she says that she had seen movement, I moved back towards her and go around. And I guess I was right there next to you by the time it stood up.
Yeah.
About the same time it stood up.
Yeah.
And we're just staring at this thing, staring back at us.
Melissa, what would you say it looked like? What would you compare it to?
Ewok. An Ewok.
It looked like an Ewok without a hoodie.
That's interesting. So an actual Ewok, huh? That's what you would compare. How big would you say it was?
7 and a half.
7, yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking of female. I don't know why. There's no reason for me to think of female. I did not see anatomy, but I'm thinking this thing was a female.
And I felt the same way.
And what did you do next? What did you guys do next after you saw it?
I just stood there. I'm sure I stood there with my mouth open, and I could hear my husband, and he's yelling, how far away, how far away, because he's got his camera. He's trying to get a picture. He's going through the brush like crazy, and I'm standing there not saying a word. And this thing took one step, and it was gone.
That's interesting. And you guys had another encounter that was pretty aggressive. You said it almost made you quit.
Yes. We were on an expedition one night, and our crew, our team split up into 3 different groups, and Carrie and I worked pretty good together, so we had went off by ourselves, and we found this spot. I guess it's around midnight. We find this spot in the woods, and we take our foot and brush back leaves and sticks and all this so we can stand there and kind of shift our weight if need be without making a lot of noise. Well, we cut our lights out. We'd been standing there a while, and we start hearing some bipedal footsteps off in the distance. And we know that there's no team members in that direction. So I take the walkie-talkie and try to radio some of the team members and let them know we have movement. Well, the walkie-talkie doesn't work. So we're standing there and we're listening to these footsteps getting closer. It's crunching the leaves. They're getting closer. And they speed up toward us, and they're, it's coming pretty good. And my heart's pounding. I don't know what to do. We're standing there by ourselves under this big oak tree, and something is heading right for us. So I told Carrie, I said, I want you to follow me. I want you to take 2 steps, cut your flashlight on. We're going to shine it in that direction. If it's an animal, which I'm hoping, it's going to deteriorate. It's going to turn around and go, turn around and run, or it's going to freeze. Well, Carrie and I take 2 steps. We cut the lights on. Naturally, there's nothing in front of us, which there should have been. And with those 2 steps, all hell broke loose behind us. Something's coming through the tree we was just standing under. We can hear it coming through the branches. We whirl around with our flashlights. We're shining our lights up in the tree, and this rock about the size of a cinder block hits the ground with a thud just where we had been standing earlier. That let me know that something didn't want us there at all. So Carrie and I turn around right then. We're heading out. We got to get out of here. We're heading back to our command central, and we're at a fast walk. We're trying not to run. We're at a fast walk, both of us terrified. We're heading back to the camp, and this thing is flanking us. We can hear the footsteps. It is staying step by step beside us.
And all of a sudden there's like 4.
And then there's the footsteps pick up on the other side of us, and then we can hear them behind us. And we're surrounded. And I'm absolutely terrified. I've gotten in too close to be comfortable. I have no weapons on me, which was a bad move on my part. I know better now. But we break the tree line and come into the light. We get over to camp, and we grab a cold drink out of the cooler and sit for a few minutes and try to get ourselves calmed down. Well, while we're sitting there talking about what has just happened, we're having rocks thrown.
And we can kind of see movement in the tree line.
So neither one of us really want to hit the woods anymore. We've just decided that we're going to stay here at camp till the rest of the team shows up. So the rest of the time that we're sitting there chatting about what's just happened, we're watching movement in the tree line, and we're getting the occasional rock that's landing beside us. So, that took me a while to push through. I wasn't comfortable in the woods anymore.
I would imagine. And it's one of those things to where it's interesting. You never know what they're going to do. It's like I had a guy on last week, and he was telling me about, the encounter he had, and he felt like it was trying to help him. It was sitting in a trail, and the vocalization it made at him was like, go away or get out of here. That was his impression of the vocalization. That's not what it said, but that was his impression of what the vocalization was. And his impression was that it was looking out for him. And, I always tell him, treat these things like you would a grizzly bear. You never know what they're going to do. You never know the temperament you're going to run into. They may be having a bad day at that moment. And if you're on the working end of their bad mood, you're in a very bad position. Did it leave you alone the rest of the night? I mean, after it was throwing rocks, did it kind of stop?
Yeah, the rest of the team kind of started dwindling back into camp. So, and actually, one of the other teams had tracked it for a while to where it kept moving through the woods, and they were tracking it with their flashlights, and it finally disappeared. The third team heard the footsteps all around them, but they didn't see anything that night. But it took me a while. When we would have another expedition come up, I would kind of be dreading it. I don't go back out just me and Carrie. I'm with a group of people now. That part I haven't pushed past. I'm not comfortable with it being just me and her anymore. I do carry a sheath, very, very large enough
And
on
a
my
very
hip,
strong
on my
stun
hip
gun.
now, and a stun gun in my back pocket.
Yeah, I don't blame you. One question I want to ask you, and I know the book is called Sasquatch and Native Truth, available on Amazon, available on Barnes & Nobles. If you look up Melissa George, there's a ton of books actually out there that she's written. And so if you get a chance, go out there, check them out, go buy them on Amazon, go buy them on Barnes & Nobles. I can't wait to get this book because I really want to read the rest of the story. The woman that you spoke to, and I got to ask this question, was it a good relationship that she seemed to have with these creatures? Was it not a great relationship?
Actually, it was not a good relationship. And I would have to say from the beginning, I think they had singled out her sister.
I think so too. I really think so.
I don't know why, but I really believe they had singled out her sister.
That's interesting that you say that. I've talked to people who have had farms. There was one recently I spoke to that didn't want to come on the show, and the guy was having all kinds of problems on this property, and he's like, I think they singled out my daughter, and his daughter's like 17. And I said, well, why do you say this? And he goes, because anytime she's around, and he thinks it's a male, almost tries to be seen, almost does weird things to try and get her attention. And he says, when I'm around, it doesn't really happen a whole lot. But if she's with me, they'll throw rocks, they'll do kind of weird things, almost like trying to get her attention. And he said the same thing you just said. He goes, I almost think they singled out my daughter.
Yeah. I would advise him to be very, very careful with that after this lady's story. I would advise him to be very careful.
Yes. Rain, she still suffers.
Yeah.
I feel like this is a movie premiere, and I can't ask if, have you guys seen the new Star Wars?
No.
Are you kidding me?
It's breaking.
Okay, everybody's going to have a fit here, but I haven't seen any Star Wars.
I can't be friends with you anymore.
Wow. I guess that was a bad analogy to use, but it's kind of like all the Star Wars geeks want to know, is Luke Skywalker the father of this new girl, Rey, that's out? And I feel like I want to ask questions about the book, but I don't want to give too much away. Was there anything else you can tell us about the book without giving too much away? It sounds like she had a really bad encounter then, if she's still kind of suffering from it.
I feel like the reservation and her parents,
Yes.
they had kind of coexisted with these creatures because they had to. They kept them somewhat happy, and that kept the parents somewhat happy, as well as the rest of the reservation. However, Raven and Rain, they had a horrible relationship with these creatures. And I think a lot of that is because it's that secret side of the reservation, and they weren't old enough yet to know what was going on.
Right.
And they're, brave young girls, and they're trying to figure out what's going on. And so that's kind of what triggered the bad relationship rather than coexistence.
Well, and again, the book is called Sasquatch and Native Truth. Everyone, if you get a chance, go out there and get it to read the full story. Melissa George is the author. And again, she has other books out there that you can get. One question I want to ask you, ladies, for my own personal, I realize this is Sasquatch Chronicles, but I got to ask, what's the scariest paranormal situation that you guys have been involved in?
My scariest paranormal experience
As
There
far
was-
as our group,
Our team.
Yeah.
Okay. We were investigating an old cemetery.
Yeah.
This cemetery is the cemetery that Andrew Pickens is buried in. There's Revolutionary War heroes buried here. This cemetery has a lady buried in it that no cemetery in South Carolina would accept her body because she was linked with some voodoo stuff in Louisiana, but she was from Charleston. Her brother actually killed her, and there's this long story about that. But for this particular cemetery to bury her, she had to have a 3-foot wall put around her grave. And lightning strikes the marble top of her grave, every few years, it'll hit this marble that's laying on top of her grave. And people do rituals there and all kinds of things. Well, one night we're doing an investigation there, and I had a radio show at the time, and I was doing a on-scene kind of thing talking about the cemetery. When these people come up, and one of the team members had noticed that they were watching me from the intersection next to the cemetery, so they were paying a lot of attention to these people as they come in. Well, they're going to do a ritual on this grave. And we have permission to be there, but these people do not. And I tell them, I've got permission to be here, but you need to leave. It's after dark. It's illegal for you to be here. Well, they're not listening. I asked for permission to film their ritual, and they give me permission for this. Well, we're walking around the cemetery, and I'm kind of just bopping from group to group, filming. And I am about to head towards where they're doing this ritual, and it was like I hit a brick wall. I physically could not go any further. I went through 3 camera batteries within 30 minutes. I went through 3 sets of batteries and another camera within just a little bit. And this night, I only saw 3 people this night, but there were actually 6 people there. It was like they were being cloaked or something. It was the strangest thing I have ever seen in my life. And I still don't have an explanation for this.
That's weird. So there was actually 6 people and you only saw 3?
Mm-hmm.
She was
Navajo.
Yeah.
The one of the women were Navajos, and she's one of the ones I couldn't see.
Yeah, she was Navajo.
Did you see her, Melissa?
Yes, I saw 6 people. There were 6 people doing the ritual. And one of our team had asked a lady if she was Cherokee. And you could see the anger in her eyes when she grabbed her pendant out of her shirt and she said Navajo, full Navajo. And then walked away like she didn't want to speak to us anymore.
Oh, yeah, you got to watch out for those Apaches.
And the team this particular night, it was strange. They were very protective.
Yeah.
It was like this whole thing came over the entire team to protect, to the point of yelling that I hadn't even been blessed in yet.
But we have been in a home with activity that was pretty dark. We've seen dark shadows.
I actually got told to F off. It said F you Carrie in the EVP.
Really? Wow.
Well, I was kind of provoking.
She was provoking at this point, and that's not something we recommend most people to do. But we've been doing this for quite a few years, and Carrie was having some fun provoking.
It was a male spirit who didn't like women.
And she kind of told him that he didn't have any kahunas.
Yeah.
Wow.
And we picked up the EVP. I wasn't the one listening to the recorder.
I was.
And Melissa was listening to the recorder afterwards, and she said, "You're not going to believe this." And I listened, and it plain as day said, F you Carrie. It knew my name and everything.
Wow, that's crazy. I haven't really got into the EVP thing. Because most of the time when they're like, hey, this place is haunted, do you want to go? And I'm like, nope. They're like, well, we got Ouija boards, do you want? I'm like, nope. And I try and stay away from that kind of thing. But what's interesting, I talked to a guy one time who was more of a ghost hunter than he was a Bigfoot hunter. And he went out to this place in Texas. And he was talking about this, and he was going to send me the audio of this EVP he sent. And it's an area where it's really well known for Sasquatch sightings. I mean, it's I mean, it's a place where it's really well known for Sasquatch sightings. He goes out and he asks the EVP, he said, do you guys ever see any Sasquatch in the area? Do you ever see any large monkeys? And the EVP came back and said, yes, they're very destructive. And I thought that was kind of weird. I was like, really? And he's like, yeah, I'll send you the copy of the EVP, of the spirit saying that they're destructive. And I was like, that's kind of weird. I mean, that'd be a weird, I guess, question to ask.
Yeah. Wow.
We should do that.
Yeah, we'll have to try that sometime. Well, actually, I like to take digital recorders and put them in waterproof bags and hang them out in Bigfoot hotspots. We actually get more caught on audio than we do trail cams.
Which is pretty common.
Yeah.
Although most people don't realize, a lot of those trail cams you can hear. I've been out hunting where I was out in the woods for almost 2 weeks, and you become really keen, your senses become really keen on everything around you. And I remember one time I asked my brother, I said, do you hear that? It sounds like a whining, like a motorized something winding up. And it was a trail cam, but I could hear it. I mean, I'd been out in the woods for so long that I could actually hear this thing. I could hear it kind of spinning and snapping pictures, and it was a trail cam on the side of a tree. So, I mean, if I could hear it with my monkey ears, I'm sure Sasquatch could hear it, 1,000 times what I could hear it.
We've wondered about that. We can't hear it, but we're not, acclimated like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's strange. Once you acclimate yourself, you're out there for a while in the woods. You'd be surprised what you hear, what you pick up on. I remember even there was a hunter that was coming. And, I mean, we could hear this guy coming from, I don't want to say a mile away because it wasn't quite that far, but we could hear this guy coming. And he had no clue we were there. And you could hear him just coming. And it's just weird. Once you're out there for a while, you kind of lose, being in the city and being around technology, we constantly are bombarded with TV and noise we drown out. I remember I lived in this home one time, and it wasn't far from the train tracks. Great place, by the way. And I say that sarcastically. We after a while, I stopped hearing the train. I couldn't hear the train anymore.
You do. Mm-hmm. I've lived near an Amtrak before, so... Yeah, you learn to drown it out.
The house I grew up in was like that. It was the train tracks were 20 feet behind the house.
Yeah. And it's just weird after a while. It's almost like your mind shuts off that sound, almost like you don't need to hear that anymore. And when you're out in those woods, I really think they can hear them. People say the infrared light, there's no concrete proof of that. They may be onto something with that. But a lot of those cheap trail cams, they have that infrared light, and I kind of think they can see in that spectrum too as well. So when you add everything into it, I could see why they would avoid those.
I've noticed that with the putting the recorders out, I took one and it's got a very tiny red light on it. Well, I put it in a waterproof bag and we took it deep in the woods. Well, the second audio, I put a piece of tape over the light. And then we put that one out. Well, the one that was taped, we got more footsteps, we got more grunts, more activity with that one than the one with the light on it.
Well, like you were talking about, you could hear the trail cam after you'd been out there for so long. My external IR lights that I use with my ghost hunting camera, I can see the red that's in the middle of the IR lights.
Yeah.
It's 48 IR lights, but then there's a red one in the middle of it.
Yeah.
And I can see that. So if I can see it, why couldn't they see it?
Yeah. No, absolutely. What book are you working on right now?
I'm doing a personal story, actually, on Dogman. It's a Dogman encounter. And we're doing an all-female Bigfoot book. It's encounters by nothing but women. So I think that's going to be pretty interesting. I don't think that's been done before, actually.
Now, what made you go that route? Is it because the encounters were different than with males, or what made you kind of...
Well, I don't know, actually. That's a good question. I don't know if anybody's noticed, but 90% of our Bigfoot community online is run by men. The women are kind of in the background here, so Carrie and I kind of hope to draw them out, to bring the women out and let them know that, hey, we're just as good at Bigfoot hunting. We could do this ourselves.
And we have more and more women come to us that are interested but don't think that they can do it.
And the majority of women are thinking, I don't want to come face to face with a 10-foot monster in the woods, when in all actuality, that's not going to happen. You've got a very slim chance of that happening. But, I'm working on 2 books right now, and if anybody else has a story they want to tell, if they want to remain anonymous and just get the story out there, I'll be happy to help them out.
Yeah, and how would someone contact you?
Email address, melissageorge143@gmail.com, or you can go on melissageorge.net.
And there's a way to contact you on there, too, as well?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I actually have a pretty large female audience that listens to the show, believe it or not. But you're right, I would say most of it's dominated by men. You wouldn't really know that. I mean, if I could show you the demographics of, I would say the bulk of my listeners are men, but there's actually a large portion that are women. It's a pretty diverse group.
Yeah.
And the other thing I found interesting when I looked at demographics of people who listen to my show, they're usually very well educated, upper middle class, and I'd probably say a good portion of them are men, but there is a huge portion that's women too as well that listen to the show. I kind of expected, I mean, I even hate to say this, but I kind of expected just a bunch of hillbillies listening, my mother and then like all the hillbillies out there listening to the show. But I was shocked with the amount of very well educated people, both men and women, and kind of your upper middle class, actually, that listens to the show, which kind of blew my mind when I saw that report.
Since we've started doing this, more and more people that I've known my entire life have come forward to me, and either they've heard something or seen something, or they believe. And this is people that I never would have thought would have even considered the possibility of a Bigfoot existing.
But if any of your female listeners have a Bigfoot encounter or a story they want to tell them to get in touch with me. We'll put them in the book.
Yeah, I will. Well, Carrie and Melissa, I appreciate you guys being on the show.
Thank you for having us. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's been a blast. And when your new book comes out, you guys, I'll have to have you both back.
Okay, that sounds good. We'll have to send you a complimentary copy.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome. And if you get a chance, everyone out there, go take a look at Melissa's book. I know she was going into it there in the beginning. Sasquatch and Native Truth. Get it on Amazon. Get it at Barnes & Nobles. Go check out melissageorge.net. Ladies, thanks for being on.
Thank you.
And that's it for tonight, everyone. Remember, if you've had an encounter, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. Go to sasquatchchronicles.com, become a subscriber, help support the show. We're going to close out a little different tonight. Normally I close out with Pompeii 90, one of my most favorite songs. Awesome group, cool guys. Recently, a listener had sent me their song, and the name of the group is Dead Hollywood Stuntmen. And the name of the song is Swamp Boogeyman. Cool song, dig the vibe of it, cool group. If you get a chance, look up Dead Hollywood Stuntmen.